Welcome to a very special episode of On the Fly podcast where we are together. We're live. Good to see you, Marty.
Good to see you.
We always could do this through Zoom. Now we get to actually be in person. But we're at the 4th annual New England Lacrosse Convention. This turns out to be one of the best lacrosse events of the year. So many coaches from really all over New England, maybe beyond, are coming together for a love of the sport. As an added bonus, Patriots are on their way to San Francisco, so we got a nice send-off in the background. We're joined by the incredible Coach Kevin Gould of Roger Williams. And thank you for your time with us, Coach. I just sat through your presentation. That's what's great about this convention is every hour there's, at least 10 sessions that a coach can go see. So you did a presentation moments ago on drills that your college runs that would be successful at a youth level as well. So I'd like to expand on that, talk through that a little bit. Before we do that, would you be so kind to give us our famous 30-second bio, which ends up turning out to be, for most guests, like 20 minutes. But just know that we have to give the room up after about 45. Yeah. So 30-second bio, Coach.
Yeah, of course. Well,
first time growing up.
Thanks for having me. I've seen the podcast from afar, so excited to now get a chance to sit here with you guys. And I'm excited to be back here. I've come back to this the last couple of years, just having such deep New England roots. I grew up in Duxbury, Massachusetts, and played my youth and high school lacrosse there, and then played at Bentley University for 4 years with Coach Murphy, and was fortunate enough afterwards to be teammates with Marty on the Boston Cannons for a few seasons as well. So my playing days took me through New England, and then had an opportunity to begin coaching, and that also has taken me through New England. I've started at Bryant University in 2013 and made my way up to Dartmouth College and UMass Lowell, Providence College, and now the last 4 years at Roger Williams University.
Amazing. In your time in the Cannons, did you have that great year where we were out here at Gillette for the year? Were you on that squad?
So I never got to play here. My time was at Harvard Stadium, which was incredible. The team drew well at the time, and the team was excellent. We won the championship in 2011, and it was a great summer job for those 3 or 4 years.
I remember fantastic times coming, bringing the youth programs. They still do. It's a little different now, the model, where they're traveling around. We get them just a little bit. But back in the day, we used to be able to have almost weekly games, bring them out, all the youth programs in attendance, getting autographs. You must miss that.
For sure. Yeah, and I was lucky enough I joined the year after the championship season. So I was part of the team in 2012. That's when I met you for the first time. And very impressed with your stick work, very impressed with your lacrosse IQ. And so I'm really interested to talk to you today from a coach's perspective. Obviously, you played youth lacrosse coming through. You've coached college now for a couple of years, and I don't know what the numbers are, but you must be on the younger side for head coach at the college level. So congrats on that. And I think our listeners definitely appreciate taking practical advice of like, hey, I love that drill, but when I watch the film of your college team doing it, how do I do that with my 3rd and 4th graders, right? So hopefully we can get into some of that today. And thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and that was kind of what led me to the discussion in the presentation earlier was, talking to Kevin Barney and trying to finding where there would be a need for a presentation in the day. And we kind of talked together and realized that I think on top of some of our drills being very beneficial for the youth and for high school, I also think there's another side of it that I think youth and high school coaches would be sort of blown away when they came to our practices and at the college level to see how elementary, how functional some of our drills are. There's certainly some very creative coaches out there when it comes to drills and stick work and all those things, but there's so many things that translate from the youth level up to the college level, and a lot of those drills that are being done at 6th, 7th, 8th grade practice are being done in the Division I college world as well on the practice field. So I think blurring the lines between youth and college drills was kind of what we wanted to get through today.
Cannot go wrong at the New England Convention doing a presentation on drills. It's funny, we have a lot of different people coming here today. Some of them, for sure, brand new to the sport, don't have it as a background, want to absorb everything. Some maybe new first-time parent coaches want just some hey, give me some 30,000-foot elevation, how to coach little kids. How do we stop them from just whacking each other on the head with a stick, which is very common for first and second. But there's a lot of coaches, hundreds, who are here with years of experience, and they just want drills. What are you running? Tell me about your practice. I need something new. I'm getting stale, or we're struggling in this area. I'm just looking for drills, drills, drills. So I thought it was an awesome presentation. Visual. I'm a visual learner, so Coach had videos of his teams running it. But I also appreciated is you had some daytime practice, some night, so I got to see it under the lights. And I was like, let me see it under the daylight. And sure enough, there it was. So it was a really great presentation, and I got a lot out of it myself, which was great. What did you come here hoping to give? Like, what did you hope that an audience member would take from that in a big picture way?
Yeah, I think it was twofold. It was certainly, even myself, when I go to our convention annually, I want to walk away with some new stuff as well. There's certainly parts of our game that you need to be really good at, and you need to, practice a ton. And sometimes you kind of get stuck in your ways, and you find some drills that you really like, and you like them, and you understand what you're trying to get at the end of the day. But your guys might be getting sick of them,
right.
And they might start creating bad habits if you don't change it up a little bit. So, I always try to walk away from these presentations and conventions with, okay, that's just a different way to do exactly what we do. Let's just change that up. Let's just give the guys something different to do. So I wanted to certainly give some coaches some drills to take back to their programs, and then certainly kind of re-emphasize that, nobody should look at a drill at their practice and say, this is too elementary for us, or this is too easy. We got to move on to something else. We start every practice with lining up 15 yards from a partner and playing partner pass, and I don't know if they still do it, but for years, Duke University starts their practice that way. So, those elementary drills that might appear, to be too easy in some regard are very important, and I tell our guys, like, this game is a lot more fun when you don't have to worry about your conditioning and your stick. This game is not fun if you have to worry about your conditioning and your stick. So let's try to, as a group, work on those two things, so that, one, it's the best part of their day when they're coming out to practice. And two, when we don't have as many turnovers as the other team, we seem to be pretty successful. So the stick work is an element that we work on for, almost half of every practice we have.
We talk an awful lot about the difference between youth athletes, kids who are in elementary school, middle school, then the high school and the collegiate athlete, because there definitely are some. You're a college coach who has to put together 5-6 practices a week. How often does the team play?
Yeah, so we're this time of year we'll probably practice 4 times a week, play twice, and have 1 day off.
So that's a full-time job just to practice playing. Youth coaches have it a little easier. We have 2 nights to plan for. So talk a little bit about you sitting down, how much time before practice is it, the day of, the day before, outlining, and then I know you've probably also earned enough time in your tenure to just say, I can show up and wing some of this. We have a plethora of drills I can pull. But I know that there's some time you sit down, maybe after some tape, maybe with the other coordinators. So just talk us through a little bit about putting that time into the planning of it.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think every staff I've been a part of has done it a little bit differently, from the head coach making the plan himself and then, having a meeting before practice with all the other coaches. And certainly I've been part of staff that it's, everyone around the round table thinking about what they need. I've kind of taken the model the last couple of years of putting it together myself during the day.
Okay.
And then kind of touching base with my assistants throughout the day as we, watch film from the previous practice or from a previous game and figure out, okay, we might have to spend a little bit more time there, tweaking what we're going to be doing that week. And every practice is different, especially this time of year. We're gearing up for the season. Some are coming off of a double overtime game where you're probably not going to do a ton with those guys that played a ton in the game. And then there's other days that you're just getting ready for a game. So you're trying to, almost save your legs a little bit in that regard. And then there's days where you have a bye week and you need to plan some practices where you're really getting after it and making sure that we're staying with it. So we're very, we're very dictated based upon what the week brings us this time of year. Certainly in the fall when we're out of season, it's a little bit more, interactive with the coaching staff in terms of what we want to get in, and making sure that we do a lot of teaching that time of year when we get, some warm weather in New England versus this time of year. And, it's an element that I think is probably one of, if not the most important part of my job. It takes me a couple hours a day to plan practice and make sure we're getting the right things in and we're not forgetting anything. And some of the drills that you saw today kind of are just, we need to get better at this aspect. How do we create a drill to do that? So it's a process that takes me quite a bit of time, and but I think it's really important to one, make sure we're doing everything we need to do, and certainly making sure that, especially this time of year, again, given the temperatures and the weather, you never know when you're going to lose a day or two, and just making sure we're getting out there and being efficient and have a plan.
So I know there's obviously a lot of context that goes into the practice plan based on what you think the needs are. But if we zoom out just a little bit, you think about the structure of the time on the field, X amount of minutes on stick work, X amount of minutes on drills, X amount of minutes on gameplay, what have you. In your opinion, would you change that structure if you were to coach, let's say, a 5th to 8th grade team? And then the same question for a 1st to 4th grade team. Do you think that same structure you use at the college level? Obviously, you guys are probably on field for 2 hours, but from a percentage standpoint, this amount of percent of time on this versus that, does that hold true K through 8, or do you think about that changing?
It's a good question. Initially, I want to say that I would keep it similar, just because I like my structure. I'm used to it. And when I say my structure, we try to do a lot where we're all used to the crawl, walk, run method. If I know that we're going to have a lot of ground balls or shooting later in the day, I want to make sure that we kind of hammer that out from a fundamental standpoint earlier in the day. The other thing we try to do is we try to kind of structure our practice so that, again, if we don't want to do all of our high intensity, full contact stuff at the beginning, and then just do a bunch of walkthrough stuff at the end. I think mentally the guys are like, all right, we've just reached that point of practice where I can kind of shut it off a little bit. So we try to kind of stagger, fast-paced live drill with, okay, slow it down. Let's walk through the clear we're going to need to run this week. Okay, let's pick it back up and just get on the end line and just do some running just to get us moving again. Okay, let's do some shooting, get us moving, get guys talking, communicating. Okay, now we got to walk through man down, so that in a way, you're kind of keeping the guys on edge, so there's no real time where they can just say, okay, we've gone through everything live. Now it's just walkthrough time. Certainly there's times where we make a practice plan and we think we got to hammer everything and every drill is mapped out. Some are 12 minutes, some are 6 minutes, some are 3 minutes. And then all of a sudden you have zone offense on the plan and line drills aren't going great, and it's like, well, if we just follow the plan and go to zone offense, guarantee that's not going to look very good. Right now, partner pass doesn't look very good.
Right.
So we do, have a little bit of a poetic license to tailor it as we need to. I think what we've done as a staff the last couple of years is really tried to figure out in our gameplay, when we win a game, why? When we lose a game, why? And a lot of it has kind of come down to just basic fundamentals. The two teams that played on that day, whether we won or lost, the more fundamental, skilled, disciplined team won. So we got to spend a ton of time on that, and it might take away from, the 10-man ride and the zone defense, but at the end of the day, we got to make sure that we're taking care of the ball and being efficient with it. So part of that starts in the recruiting process, recruiting guys that don't turn the ball over a lot and have good stick work and understand the game. And certainly there's an element of player development that we want to make sure that we're sticking, to the course and following the plan there as well.
Right.
I know that at the youth level, there's virtually zero, and I wish there were, but virtually zero classroom time. Times we can get the kids in, whiteboard, show them some things visually before we get out there and just play. How much classroom time do the college kids get, if any?
Yeah, we do a good amount. Yeah, we do a good amount of it. I think especially this generation, they like watching themselves, and I mean that in a positive way. Sometimes you show a clip and you try to tell the group, this may not be you on the screen, but you might find yourself in this situation. I can read the room. I know that kid is watching that intently,
Mm-hmm.
and not everybody is, and so we do a good amount of, film work individually or in small group. I think, again, when I was in college, we could sit the whole team in an auditorium and watch film for 40 minutes, and everybody was dialed in for 40 minutes. That really isn't the case right now, which is, again, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it is what it is. Me calling 3 or 4 guys in to watch film is better than 45 right now. But we do quite a bit of it. I think, there aren't as many guys from, again, we're probably dating ourselves, but you could hear something on the field or look at a playbook, and, more guys are just visual learners. We have these phones and we all have iPads, they're just visual people. So we do quite a bit of the film work, and fortunately lacrosse has kind of evolved where I can watch practice on the system we use, Score Break, and just hold it down and slide it over to Marty, and it goes right to Marty's phone, and he can watch that clip. So it's certainly still being efficient with our time. These guys are busy during the day, and they got to carve out 3 hours for practice and film and taking care of their bodies. They also got to go to class too. So there's not a ton of time during the day. So we're trying to be as efficient as we can, but a lot of the day is spent with group meetings and positional meetings.
So Marty, how does a youth coach make up for that? Because we also have kids who are visual learners. We can explain all day long, I want you to cut here, I want you to move there, pass it and go, but until they see it. So what can a youth coach who doesn't have the luxury of getting the classroom time and video and whiteboard, how do they kind of help those players out in the field? What's your take on that?
My initial gut is we need to prioritize creating an environment that teaches the skill we want to emphasize. And we've gone in length on this topic before, but it's really hard. Let's say if it's a 1st to 4th grade team, almost everything is gamified, right? I can't do stick work for more than 5 minutes before they start sword fighting in the line, right? And so I need to turn it into a game. I need to create a point system. I need to do things like that. And to directly answer your question, they need to experience it. And the only way they're going to experience it is by putting them in that environment, and then ideally calling out what I see is right. So if they do the V cut and they cut hard to get open, but the ball carrier didn't see them, I can still be like, nice cut, you were open. I know you didn't get the ball, but that's exactly the movement that we want to see. Keep doing that, right? And to me, that's it. Is if I can create eye contact and create a connection with a kid right after they do something right that we're working on, I think that's how they learn. I think that, okay, that's the validation of like, oh, that was what I didn't get the ball. Did I do anything? And that validation can be really helpful. This next thing might not be feasible for a coach who's got 40 kids in front of them, especially at the 3rd and 4th grade level. But even with your phone, an iPad maybe is a little bit better. But if you're working on something specific, and to your point, they like to watch themselves. If I can record 30 seconds, 45 seconds of something, and then say, hey, everyone, come look at this. You notice how, if this player is here, if we just move this way, there's a little bit of a better angle or whatever we're trying to do. That can be an effective tool. It's just not super sustainable, I think, at the youth level to be walking around with your iPad, right?
But that's a really good suggestion, though. If the kids really aren't getting something, maybe a clear,
and maybe within a drill or at a station where you only got 10 kids there, maybe that's something you have in your back pocket. But
sure.
What's your take?
I love the concept of mental reps. So I hear what you're saying in terms of tell the kid, you just did a great job, make eye contact, and they are validated. They don't get to see themselves unless you have the laptop or the iPad filming it and call them back. But if I gather all the other kids around to watch, I tell them, you're not just in line. It's the hardest thing in the world for youth coaches to manage the kids in the line. You want fast turnover. You want them in the drills, not standing still. But if we get this concept of everyone gather around and take the mental reps, watch what's going on, listen to what these coaches are telling that player who just did a pass and cut the way you're looking for, that's what we're expecting out of you when you come into this drill. Now you see it. Now you showed us the star drill, and that can be a little complicated for a 1st, 2nd grader to figure out I'm going to the 2nd cone. But you put the experienced kids in the front to do it, and then the kids who's 3rd in line, they go, okay, I'm following. I skip that one, I go there, and then that's a good way for them to learn as well. But it's really important for them to be watching it and making sure that they're not just doing this and famously in the line, but they're intently taking those mental reps. So that's my take on it. But
Love it.
yeah.
I got a question for you, Coach. So when you think about your style of coaching and kind of what you prioritize and what you're looking for, has there been a moment in your coaching journey where you either heard it from another coach or you witnessed something and you had like an aha moment where you're like, oh, I'm actually going to change my priority here?
Yeah, probably every time I talk to another coach. I think that's the greatest part of coaching is that we're all doing the same thing, and in some ways doing it very differently. I think again, I was fortunate that I played in a great youth program, and our teams in high school when I kind of started playing competitively and realizing lacrosse might be something I wanted to do in college. I'll be the first one to say I think I was fortunate. I came through Duxbury at a great time. There were kids above me that were better than me. There were kids below me that were better than me. So I had to kind of work really hard just to even have a spot on the field. But I think coming out of that, and I've talked to some coaches that have also attended terrific high school programs. I kind of came out of that saying, okay, the way Duxbury does it is the right way to play lacrosse. And I probably had a little bit of a closed mindset going into college when, I had great coaches telling me different things, and I was like, well, we didn't do that in Duxbury. That can't be the right way to do it. I just had this had to be the right way, and I was.
Gary Ann has something to say about that.
Yeah. And I was meeting kids out on my team at Bentley from other terrific programs, and I'm like, well, wait a second, okay, he came from Syosset, he came from Mountain Lakes. Maybe there are other ways to do this, and I think that was an eye opener for me in my playing days that has kind of bled into how I go about it coaching wise, and whether it's drills, whether it's schematics, whether it's culturally, I talk to most of my friends are coaches at this point, and we talk all the time about just different ways to do things. So it's like we talked about earlier. I think guys my age, our age, kind of think, okay, there's one way to do it, and it's hard work, and you just gotta keep going on that same line, and kids right now they need it changed up once in a while. They don't want to do just line drills every day. They don't care if that's the way Duxbury did it. They might not care that's the way Virginia does it. They just, let's change it up, or they're again going to create bad habits or show poor body language, and certainly you got to coach some of that stuff up, but at the same time you got to I think right now more than ever you have to meet guys halfway, rather than saying this is the way we do it at Roger Williams. Just the guys that will do it my way are going to play. I think there is an element of kind of meeting the group halfway and kind of figuring out what's best for that group, and not so much what you've done for your career.
And getting to establish your own culture with those kids, not saying this is the tradition, but now we're going to create our own, and that can change year to year as well with personnel, different players, different coaches you bring on. This is somewhat related, but you said something during your presentation that I perked up at. You introduced us to the spider drill, named after Richmond, that's their mascot, and you said, I stole this from them. And I go, oh, I love that, because that's what coaches need to do. We need to steal from one another. That's what we're here to do at the New England Convention today, is I want to steal that. I want to use that. That's a great method. And it's not just drills, by the way. It's, I love the way that you talk to your players in your timeout, or I love the way you handled, that problem with the parent or the booster club or whatever it is. I want to steal that. That's what's great about this community, is it's small, it's close-knit, and it's just expected that, hey, if it works for me, it's going to work for you. That higher tide raises all ships kind of a proverb.
Yeah, that whole presentation could have been titled "The Best Stuff I've Stolen." that could have been the name of the whole thing.
Yeah, right. I'm running a great drill now called Limestone. My kids are so excited about it. Travesty that Limestone lacrosse is no longer there. They were like so dominant for years. But I saw the University of Virginia running that and calling it the Limestone. And it's basically, you have a very similar drill. It's the 4-on-3 keep away. And what it is, and I've already kind of mentioned this on the podcast, but it's a 4-on-3 and basically the restraining size box, or it is the restraining box. And then whoever catches the fourth pass brings it into the next box. And so you have another 4-on-3, and then whoever catches that brings it into the final box. So you have this back and forth kind of 4-on-3s going on, and the kids love it. And I just totally stole it from University of Virginia, and now it's the most popular drill in my teams right now. So that's how we got to do it, right?
Well, it's the only time we can encourage stealing. Be proud of it. And I think there's also there's like a mindset attached to this. I think it stems from being a student, and as a coach, I think we are obliged. We must be students as coaches. It's the biggest mistake. Oh, I'm in charge. I'm the coach. What I know is going to be the way. And like what I'm hearing you say is there's like a level of fluidity and a level of openness and a level of curiosity of like, I'm interested that you do it a very different way. Let's try how that works, and just being open to that. And I think youth coaches generally are good about that, because most of us are like, all right, I just went from 3rd, 4th grade to 5th, 6th grade. Like, what do I do? Who can help me? And I'll start scouring the internet. And I think this is a great event for that. And I appreciate you guys being here live too, of like, let me go see what these coaches have to say. Let me go learn from this type of coach. Let me go learn about the girls' game and see if I can apply some of that. And had a conversation with Brody Merrill about how to take the box lacrosse game and take some of the advantages of that. And it's just the mindset of like being a student is so important for a teacher.
Yeah, and there's so many sports that you can take things from. I think basketball is a big one that I spend a lot of time watching. Basketball. You alluded to indoor lacrosse. I always thought they had very efficient pregame warm-ups. Similar to ice hockey. We've taken a bunch from that. It was in this stadium that I saw the Patriots just stretching, and I said, "Geez, we got 52 guys. They got around 52 guys. How do they get everybody stretched efficiently before the game?" And we broke it up, and now we stretch very similar to how they do it, because they get it done in 8-9 minutes, and then they can go, and it's efficient. And I got no problem stealing from the potential Super Bowl champs.
Absolutely. That's so funny. We talk about bringing people here together. This is very nuanced to lacrosse, but I think there's a market for there to be a youth sports convention, bring in coaches from all different sports. We're all kind of dealing with the same stuff. Might be a different ball, might be a different set of rules, but we can learn from each other. And also just the general concepts of what it means to volunteer, put your foot forward, and try to influence, your local community kids into having a great time, staying athletic. Boy, my goal in my beginning part of my coaching career was to, make better lacrosse players and, keep up with the towns surrounding me that have had it for a long time. My goals have shifted now. I want kids off of their iPads. That's it. Get away from screens. If you can come out and run around with me today, what a win that is. And the parents, they look at you, they're like, I'm just happy to get them away for an hour and a half. On top of that, they're getting a nice lacrosse education too. But I think there's something about just learning from all the other sports as well, which is really important.
Yeah, I think I've probably taken that from some of our players the last few years. Is for me, especially early in my coaching career, everything was about winning on Saturday, and we kind of went through the week, but we were always waiting for game day. And if you won, you were you were relieved for a little bit, and if you lost, you were miserable for a while. And now it's just kind of, you realize how important every day is with these guys, that, sometimes, my goal tomorrow is going to be to have a really good practice on Monday, and kind of just compartmentalize each day of the week, because if you don't, you get to the games and you realize, okay, we lost the game, and it might be because of how we practiced all week, or how we weren't focused all week because we were just gearing up to the result that, at the end of the day, we don't always are able to control. So, I think that's really helped me just kind of stay focused day to day, rather than looking at, one day a week is kind of the end all be all for your mood, your mindset for the next 7 days.
Amen. Not to put anybody on the spot, but this is one of the first times we've had the opportunity of having an audience with us today. So I want to give people the opportunity to ask questions, either to Coach Gould or to Marty or myself. So I'm going to give you a second to think about something, because I want to hear from somebody. But in the meantime, will you walk us through like a typical midseason practice for us? Like 2 hours, as Marty said, youth coaches can take that and take the percentages and break it down. But from warm up to how you end your practices, just talk us through a typical, let's call it mid-April.
Yeah. So, we try to stay pretty structured in our approach to practice, so that the guys kind of know it at the point in mid-April, like, if we're coming off a game, what type of practice we're going to be doing, or if we're preparing for a game, what type of practice we're going to be doing. if we use 2 full hours, which we do and we don't, some days, if we do, kind of from a 30,000 foot level, we're going to spend about half that time going over stuff we need to go over, from a previous game or stuff we need to implement for an upcoming game. And then we'll take, those 20, 25 guys that have been playing in the games and kind of give them time to either go take care of their bodies or get some extra shooting in. And then college lacrosse teams right now, we have 46 guys. So there's 20 of them that, unfortunately didn't get into that game that previous day. So we'll do a lot with them, kind of that second half of practice where we're making sure that they're staying in shape and still developing. And, a lot of times that's younger guys that are, still getting acclimated to college lacrosse. So, I don't think, when you get into the spring, we got 46 guys. If we're only spending time with 25 of them, if there's an injury or someone starts playing poorly, we haven't really developed the other half of the roster. So, we typically spend a lot of time with the guys that aren't playing necessarily in the game, for the second half of practices in the spring. But we start off, practice with a lot of stick work. Again, some of the drills we showed in the presentation, if we have our legs and we can do some moving, we got some stick work drills for that. If we're just coming off of a game or a couple games in a short amount of time, we have some more stationary stick work stuff we can do so that we are kind of resting and still keeping our sticks dialed in. And then a lot of it is again, kind of that crawl, walk, run model where, whatever we do, we kind of build practice backwards, where if we know we have to end with 6-on-6 or some transition, we're going to try to hit a lot of those elements before we get there, so that we don't start, our 6-on-6 with a, off our heel sidearm shot. If we don't work on that, then it's not going to carry over as well. So, we try to build stuff into that. There's certainly an element of again, you gave the time frame mid-April of, making sure that we certainly stay, to ourselves and worry about ourselves and what do we have to improve on and what do we have to get better at, but also wanting to make sure the guys are prepared for what's coming, in the upcoming weekend in tournaments. So, there's certainly an element of implementing, what the other teams are going to be doing coming up on our schedule, as well as making sure that, we're going to be the best version of ourselves. And, it's a short season, relatively speaking, but if you don't do it, correctly day to day, it can feel long to the guys, especially being a school up in New England where it is cold outside. You got to make sure that, whatever you're doing, you still want the guys looking forward to, getting out of class and coming to lacrosse practice.
Of course, yeah, they're playing better when they're excited, looking forward to coming to practice. That makes a ton of sense. I love that concept of figure what you want to end with, work backwards so you can implement what you want to work on to get there. That's really great. Any questions? Yes, sir.
When you were talking earlier about doing a lot of stick work at your practices, how much do you emphasize stick work in preparation outside of practice versus inside practice?
Yeah, great question. So, I tell the guys all the time, when you come to practice and we're there, 90 minutes, or 2 hours at the most, that time the coaching staff is doing whatever we can to make our team better, and that can be ride, clear, it can be ground balls, it can be inside the box. You really got to work on your personal development outside of practice, and that's it's part of it's recruiting, recruiting guys that, it drives them crazy. You can only practice, 24 times in the fall. So they want to use those other days to get out there on their own. But certainly it's an element that, you want to make sure you're getting guys that outside of what you're doing at practice. I always say to the guys, especially in the fall, we're able to practice 24 days for 2 hours. If say go home and ask mom and dad if they went to work this fall 24 times for 2 hours, probably not going to be very good at their job. So making sure that the guys are really getting the work in, and understanding and coming to the coaches and saying, hey, what do I need to work on outside of practice? And for the most part, they know, but it's always good to get some reassurance from the coaching staff. So I think we work on it because it's an element of the game that's going to make our team better if we do work on it. But individually, we want those guys to, if you really got to work on your dodging, we're not going to spend a big chunk of practice because you have to work on your dodging. We tell them you have the summer, you have the fall. We're going to work on your personal development in those 2 seasons. Once we get to this time of year, we got to make sure the team is rolling and operating at full capacity. So, and for those guys that aren't getting on the field on game day, you got to recruit guys that are going to, work at it and not just put their head down and be bummed out and feel bad for themselves. They're going to say, okay, I'm going to be ready when there's an injury at my position or a guy's just not playing well. I'm going to be the one coach knows is going out to get extra shots in or playing wall ball and those things. So
I'll build on that too, because I know for youth coaches, it's a big challenge. There's obviously only 2 practices per week typically, right? Sometimes only an hour, maybe 75 minutes. And what I've seen coaches do is create some sort of a wall ball challenge. Maybe there's some sort of reward that comes along with it. But to me, there should be at least 3 tiers, because what coaches may not realize is there's 3 or 4 kids on your team that'll do it every day. If you give them a 7-day-a-week, 10-minute program, 4 of those kids will do it. And it's not required, but here's a layout that's an option, right? And maybe the mid-tier is what you would typically, 3 days a week, 15 minutes a session. If you can do that, we're in a great spot. And then what's your minimum viable product, right? Hey, can you please hit the wall 1 time before I see you next, for 10 minutes, just on your strong hand. I need you to be able to catch the ball. And so creating those tiers of like, hey, some of your kids, they're going to brush it off and they're not going to do anything. And some of those kids will go find that brick wall and they will do that 7-day-a-week program. And there's no disadvantage to offering it.
It's a great question. Yes, young man.
That's a great question, right? Because I said we have 46 of them this year, and they're all different, right? And again, in our theme of stealing, I think Coach Vrabel said it the other day in one of his press conferences that we can have 46 different people, and they can have different characteristics and come from different areas of the world, but we got to have one mission, right? So we got to make sure that even though every guy on our team is very different in many different areas, we got to make sure that as coaches, we kind of make our expectations very clear and make sure that we all are kind of on the same page and going in the same direction to make sure that, everything is clear. That's kind of our big thing as coaches. We got to make things very clear and concise for the guys so that there's no gray area in where we're trying to go. But to your point, it's more difficult with 46 players than it would be, coaching 14 or 15 on a basketball team. So
when you have assistant coaches, coordinators, assistants, what's your coaching staff in terms of like a ratio between 46 guys and your staff that can at least someone can help?
Yeah, so we have 2 assistant coaches that work with us, and it's great. They're able to be at all our practices, obviously, and I think that can make it challenging, especially at the college level when, especially this time of year, you're separating your offense and defense,
Mm-hmm.
Quite a bit, similar to a football team. You certainly have to have guys that are going to be there, but certainly guys you trust as well. And I've been very fortunate that we've had, some continuity on our staff the last few years. And, it plays a big part in the preparation and knowing that, what we need to get done on one side of the field, even if I'm not down there, is getting done. So it's a big part of it.
What a great question. Thank you. You have another one, sure?
When you find a drill or something that your team really likes, how important is it to maybe add a wrinkle to it or add a little bit more? Like I've seen one drill that I love that my guys love is when you split the field in half, that 2v3 and they can only stay on that portion of the field, but I consider it stolen, by the way, that you take it from the top and cut the top of the field in half. So I will be stealing that. But how important is it when you find a drill, a limestone drill, that you add a little bit more so that you can change it, maybe keep that drill going, or when you find something that works, possibly tweak it so that you can use it even more?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think understanding your team and how your team could benefit from it most. A lot of the drills we do where we've stolen from somebody else and then said, you alluded to that 3-on-2 drill, and we realized, hey, our defense is getting kind of stretched out of position here. Let's throw an offensive player inside. That will get them back into the paint. So, just understanding kind of when you're putting in those new drills that you steal, okay, this is going well. The guys like it. Is there an opportunity here to add a second ball? Or is there an opportunity here to add another player to it? That's probably one of my faults is I'm always looking at drills saying, okay, how can we do this quicker? How can we get more people involved in it? And sometimes I do it and it screws it up, and I say, go back to the way we stole it. So I think just kind of tweaking, knowing what your team needs, and adding either lines or balls to the drills to make it go for you.
It's a great thought, and I think we actually talked about this concept a little bit already, which is sometimes you don't change the drill at all. You just change the focus point. And a common example I use is one of the hardest things to teach, I think all the way through high school, is off-ball movement. When the player has the ball in their stick and someone's chasing them, they run, right? But everyone else is like standing there like doing nothing, right? And the wrinkle of, let's say, keep away or a scrimmage type of drill could be, hey, it's 2 points if it's an assisted shot. So now we're putting an emphasis on passing. Or, hey, you're only allowed to have the ball on your stick for 3 seconds, 4 seconds. So now once that rule really sets in, everyone else who doesn't have the ball is going, oh, crap, I got to get open because he has to get rid of the ball. So I think it's a great thought because depending on what your team needs to work on, you don't need to change the drill. You're just changing the focus point. Maybe we change the parameters a little bit. But I think great coaches are constantly asking themselves that question. So great question.
And then something else we've talked about as well is that drill might be different things to different players. So a beginner is just looking to kind of be in the right spot. Maybe they get the catch and the throw, and that's a victory. Your experienced players running the same drill, you could pull them aside and give them their own special wrinkle and challenge to kind of keep them engaged as well. But I think that if you find a drill that the kids love and the coaches love and you're getting something out of it and you're getting better out of it, I don't think you need to change it at all. I think you can just say, this is our drill, and you bring it out when you need a burst of energy. You have a nice loud drill or something that everyone really looks forward to. Just keep running it. Just as Marty was saying, they'll have different focal points. This time we're going to be discussing the footwork. Next time it's going to be, what are we saying while we're running this drill, et cetera. So, a couple of different ways to look at that. Yeah.
And if your guys love it, I would say don't be afraid to use it as a reward. If it's a drill they love to do, we do it, constantly. Where we say, hey, my hope is we can get to 3v2 sides here, after this ground ball drill, and that kind of just ramps up. Okay, a drill that they, ground balls aren't the most exciting, drills in the world, but hey, if this looks good, here's where we're going. If
but
not,
they have to earn it.
They got to earn it. Yeah, we can stay with the ground balls, for the extra 10 minutes if we need to, but. Obviously using it as a reward can be beneficial as well.
I love that. Nice carrot, of course. Yeah, that's great. This is a strange one, and not to put you on the spot to think of it, but if you announce that you are retired and you're going to be done and this is your last practice and you have 15 more minutes left for one drill, what's your favorite go-to? This is my swan song drill.
Yeah, for me, it's probably that 3v2 sides plus one.
Nice setup.
I think, just being a former offensive player, anytime there's more offensive people than defensive people, I like those ones.
Mm-hmm.
It's fast paced, it's quick, you're able to kind of use a bunch of different skill sets. Typically I have seen with teams, it's a fun one because the O guys are giving the D guys a hard time and vice versa. When the defense gets a stop, they remind you there's only 2 of them and 4 of you, and it can get the energy up and excitement up. And it's, sometimes I just sit back and listen to what the guys are saying to each other, and it's pretty entertaining that way too. So I'd say that because it's fun, it's fast paced, there's a lot of goals, and the guys enjoy, giving it to each other back and forth.
Oh, great answer. I love that. That's really cool. Well, unless there's any other questions, I think this is kind of a nice little time to final thoughts. So, Coach, we'll start with you. Any last thing that you'd like to talk about as far as either the convention or drills or just anything in general?
No, I think it's awesome what you guys have been doing. I see the social media clips everywhere, and there's no doubt that the podcasts and the social media clips are what people are seeing nowadays, and it sparked my interest to talk to Marty about setting something up. And so just thank you guys for what you're doing. I know you guys both love it, but you're also both knowledgeable and giving the people what they need. So it's good to not always come from our mouths at the college level. It's good to see it down in the youth level as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Marty. Any final thoughts from you?
No, I'm good. Yeah, appreciate the live audience we have here today. Appreciate the listeners, and appreciate you, Kevin, for being with us and spending some time. And hopefully the coaches got something out of it. And I know I certainly appreciate it. So thank you, of course.
Amazing. Well, this is another great episode of On the Fly podcast. We, as Marty said, appreciate everything. And especially to the coaches who are here at the convention today. We're only halfway through. So much more great stuff on the way. So I look forward to it myself. So thank you both. Thank you for our live audience coming to join us today. And thanks for our listeners at home.